The case of the disappearing accountant. It was a quiet summer evening in the small town of Ashland, Ohio, when a seemingly ordinary woman named Susan Palmer went missing. Susan was a 42-year-old accountant known for her routine life. She worked at a local firm, loved gardening, and was well-liked by her neighbors. Nothing about her seemed unusual, except for the fact that she vanished without a trace on August 10, 2017. Susan's disappearance was first noticed when she didn't show up for work on a Wednesday morning. Her boss, worried by her unusual absence, called her phone multiple times, but there was no answer. By the afternoon, her colleagues started to get concerned. Susan was known for her punctuality, and she never missed a day without informing someone. When her boss decided to visit her home, he found the front door slightly ajar. Inside, the house was spotless and in perfect order, but Susan was nowhere to be found. Her car was parked in the driveway, her phone was on the kitchen counter, and her purse was sitting on the dining table. It looked as if she had just stepped out for a moment, but she never returned. The local police were called in, and Detective Laura Hayes was assigned to the case. Detective Hayes had been on the force for over 15 years, and she had seen her fair share of missing persons. But there was something about this case that felt different. There were no signs of a struggle, no forced entry, and no obvious clues to suggest where Susan could have gone. The first step was to interview everyone who knew Susan. Her neighbors, friends, and co-workers all described her as friendly but private. She lived alone and didn't seem to have any close relationships. She spent most of her time either at work or at home. There were no boyfriends, no recent travel plans, and no family in town. Detective Hayes dug deeper into Susan's life, checking her phone records, bank statements, and social media accounts. There were no suspicious transactions, no strange messages, and no indication that Susan was planning to leave. It was as if she had simply disappeared into thin air. Days turned into weeks, and the case grew colder. Then, on September 2, 2017, a jogger found a torn piece of Susan's scarf near a wooded area about 5 miles from her home. It was the first physical evidence related to the case. The area was searched extensively, but no further clues were found. The discovery of the scarf raised new questions. What was Susan doing in the woods? Did she go there willingly, or was she taken against her will? The police brought in search dogs, drones, and even volunteers from the community. Despite their best efforts, Susan was still missing. As the investigation continued, Detective Hayes started to look into Susan's past relationships. One name kept coming up: Tom Fisher, Susan's ex-boyfriend. They had dated briefly about a year before her disappearance, but the relationship ended badly. According to Susan's friends, Tom was controlling and had a temper. He didn't take the breakup well and had tried to contact Susan multiple times afterward. Detective Hayes decided to bring Tom in for questioning. Tom admitted that he was upset about the breakup, but he insisted that he had nothing to do with Susan's disappearance. He claimed that he hadn't seen or spoken to her in months. He provided an alibi for the day she went missing. However, there was no solid evidence to link him to the case. Despite his denials, Tom's behavior raised red flags. He seemed nervous and defensive, and his alibi had a few holes. But without concrete evidence, Detective Hayes couldn't make an arrest. Frustrated, she kept Tom on her list of suspects but knew she needed more to crack the case. Just as hope was fading, the breakthrough Detective Hayes needed came from an unexpected source. A local hiker found a set of car keys in a remote part of the same woods where Susan's scarf was found. The keys matched Susan's car, which had been sitting in her driveway since she vanished. This discovery led the police to expand their search area, and 2 days later, they found Susan's body partially buried under leaves and branches. The medical examiner determined that she had been strangled. The condition of her body suggested she had been killed shortly after she disappeared. Now, the case was no longer a missing person investigation. It was a murder, With a murder on their hands, the pressure was on Detective Hayes to find the killer. She revisited every piece of evidence, every interview, and every lead. Then, she remembered something Tom had said during his interview. He mentioned a specific hiking trail near the woods where Susan's body was found, a detail that had never been released to the public. Tom was brought in again, and this time his story started to unravel. When confronted with the new evidence, Tom's nervousness turned into panic. He tried to change his alibi, but it was too late. The police had also found surveillance footage showing Tom's truck near the woods on the day Susan went missing. That, combined with cell phone records placing him at the scene, was enough to arrest him for Susan's murder. After hours of interrogation, Tom finally confessed. He admitted that he couldn't accept the fact that Susan didn't want to be with him. On the day she disappeared, Tom went to her house to try to convince her to get back together. When she refused, things escalated, and in a fit of rage, he strangled her. Realizing what he had done, Tom panicked and decided to hide her body in the woods, thinking that no one would ever find her. Tom's trial was swift. He was found guilty of murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The courtroom was filled with Susan's co-workers, neighbors, and even strangers who had followed the case from the beginning. They all wanted justice for the quiet accountant whose life was cut short by a man who couldn't take no for an answer. Susan's death shook the small town of Ashland. She was remembered as a kind, hardworking woman who didn't deserve the fate that befell her. Her case served as a reminder that even in the most peaceful communities, danger can lurk behind closed doors. Detective Hayes continued her work, solving cases and bringing justice to those who couldn't speak for themselves. But Susan's case stayed with her. It was a reminder of how fragile life could be and how quickly everything could change. For the people of Ashland, Susan Palmer's story was not just another crime. It was a tragic tale of lost potential, broken trust, and a life that ended far too soon. They learned that sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones hiding in plain sight, behind the mask of normalcy. True crime stories like Susan Palmer serve as a chilling reminder of the unpredictable nature of human behavior. They highlight the importance of paying attention to the signs that something is wrong and the need for communities to come together in times of crisis. Though Susan's life ended tragically, her story lives on as a warning to others and a call for justice for all victims of senseless violence.